Hi, this is Shawn Andrews, development lead for the DM Series products. Today we'll be going over the features in the 9.7 Storage Manager application. The 9.7 Storage Manager application has multiple changes in it, consisting of a simplified GUI. Today what we'll be discussing is changes between aggregates and tiers, how to create storage virtual machines using the new 9.7 interface, how to assign LUNs, how to create shares and Qtrees, how to create network interfaces, and how to configure the mirror relationships. We will also be discussing how to find the Lenovo MTM and serial number in the new interface. So just to go back through that, all I did is launch the Storage Manager application and select storage and come down to tiers. From that tiers, you only get two options, add local tier or add cloud tier. Once you select add local tier, you no longer get the option for the RAID levels that you want to use. It automatically selects the RAID levels for you. In this case, it's going to do a RAID DP. Because I don't have the same number of drives across the two controllers, one of the two is going to be larger than the others. So I'm going to get a 6.3 terabyte tier on node 1, and I'm going to get a 5.5 terabyte tier on node 2. You don't get an option to change anything. You either select this and say that this is what you want to do, or you cancel it and you have to use the CLI. You cannot change any of these settings. One other thing to keep in mind, because I only have SSD drives, I'm able to configure SSD tiers. If I had an intermix of SSD drives and HDD drives, it would only configure the HDD drives, and all SSD drives would have to be configured using the CLI. It is not like before where you could go in and do a manual aggregate creation and select the drives individually. It will only allow you to configure one drive at a time, and it does not allow you to intermix drives within the same system using the GUI aggregate creation in 9.7. Once your tiers are created, you will see them like these two here. These tiers are actually tiers that I had back in my 9.4 system. That's actually how long these have been around. So I can go in and get the details associated with them, as well as which node is servicing them, how many drives are in them. In this case, I have 50 drives total that are all associated with this tier. This is actually the largest one that I have. This system has 72 drives total, which is why I actually had drives that were free before that you saw in the previous configuration. So if I go back to the previous screen and I look at my sys tier, I should see a very similar number of drives, yes. Because in my case, I have them split half and half. So I have 51 drives assigned to tier 1, and I have 51 drives assigned to tier 2. I know it sounds weird because I said I had 72 drives, but in this case, it counts a drive as a partitioned drive. And so even though I have 72 drives, I actually have 144 drives total in this system, because each of my drives has multiple partitions on it, which is why my disk count is so much higher than what you would expect to see. So do not pay attention to the disk count anymore. It doesn't mean what you think it means. Disk count can mean a physical drive, or it can mean a partitioned drive. Because I don't have any of the fabric services enabled, you'll notice that options like mirroring are disabled, snap lock is disabled, and flash pool is disabled. Once you have your tier created, you can go in and create your storage virtual machine. One thing that you will notice during the storage virtual machine creation now is you get far fewer options than what you used to have. So we'll just create a storage virtual machine that we would say we're going to use for fiber channel services maybe. all I can do is select my virtual machine, select which one of the ports that I want to use. In my case, I only have E and F because C and D are actually being used for NFS and CIFS services in my configuration. I can no longer select which aggregate I want to create it on. It'll automatically select the aggregate for me, and then I click Save to actually do the SVM creation. So if you do not assign your ports here, you will have to go back and manually assign them later on. It will enable the service, but it will not enable any of the ports, so you will not be able to run I/O to them. After your storage virtual machines are created and your tier is available, you will then create either your LUNs or your volumes associated with those systems. I'm just going to create an existing LUN on my multi-LUN configuration because it is the simplest one to do at this point. And I will assign it to host 3, which is the one that we did all of the I/O discovery to before. Again, everything is a lot more simplified now versus what you used to have. So select your host from your pull-down list. You no longer get the option for port groups like you used to do. You also do not get the option for assigning an individual LUN number. All of that is missing from the new screens. From the advanced configuration, you can select things like your performance levels. If you want certain volumes to have a higher degree of performance, like QoS performance, than other volumes, this is where you would assign it here. But you still cannot do things like individual LUN assignments or any of the advanced configuration options that you used to be able to do in the previous version of the GUI. Also, if you have new groups or new hosts, you will have to go into the advanced configuration option and configure them here. You cannot configure a new group or a new LUN from the default configuration screen. It expects them to already be present when you go in for the LUN creation. So I'm actually not going to create it on my host here, just because I'm trying to maintain as much space as I possibly can. One thing to note, though, is if you want to do your fabric pool or any of your mirroring configurations, you would need to do them prior to creating the LUNs, so that that is already running in the background before the LUN creation is performed. A similar thing is true for any shares that you want to create. So in my case, I have multiple CIFS shares that are already created on my system because I have a CIFS virtual machine as well. I have 2 shares that I have been using to a Windows host. If I want to go in and create a new one, I select it here. One of the things you will notice is you actually get 2 options now that used to be all under one screen previously. You get an option to create a share, or you get an option to create a home directory. Keep in mind that creating a home directory can result in multiple shares being present, because this would be like creating a home directory inside of a Linux system with multiple users associated with that home directory based on how you have assigned user permissions to be inherited inside there. So home directories can get quite complicated depending upon how you have them set up. Clicked on the wrong thing. Because you will need to assign all of your user access permissions for your home directory for them to be created properly. For shares, it is a lot simpler for an actual user share. Unlike before where you were assigning permissions for the shares, all users get default access for a share when it is created in 9.7. So effectively, it creates it with an export policy of 000 read write. Um, Previously, whenever you're creating shares and uh, when you were creating shares and Qtrees, you also had the option to create export policies. There is no way to create an export policy in 9.7. The GUI has completely removed that function. To create new export policies, those must be created underneath the CLI. Okay, that was the storage tab. The network tab has a similar type of layout. You get all of your cards in the middle of the screen. The cards are what you used to have as breakdowns underneath the network tab previously in your v3 version of the GUI. So you have an IP spaces, you have broadcast domains, and then you have the network interfaces or LIFs like you used to have in the previous version of the GUI. In my case, I have a fairly simple layout for how the systems are set up. I have a default configuration for my broadcast domain, and then I have it split across two network segments, a BC14 and a BC16, so that I can split my NFS sys traffic away from my iSCSI traffic. In my case, all of my iSCSI traffic goes to my BC16 broadcast domain, and the BC14 broadcast domain is used for NFS and CIFS. I have a single IP space defined, which is the default IP space. And then each of my LIFs is assigned into one of those two broadcast domains. So you can see in my case, I took and I assigned a VLAN 14 assigned to the broadcast domain of BC14, and I have a VLAN 16 that is used for all of my CIFS and NFS traffic. If you want to create new network interfaces or new broadcast domains, you click on the plus sign now, versus where you used to click on an option that said create, and then you assign whatever ports that you want to have into the system. Again, I've already defined all the ports, so I actually can't create any new broadcast domains at this point. I can assign lists into the existing broadcast domains though. So one of the things that is different in 9.7 is there are new roles associated with the system. Previously, you only had a data role or a management role. Now you have three roles, a data role, an intercluster role, or a storage VM management. And then from that, you can assign either CIFS, NFS, iSCSI, or Fiber Channel. There is no option to enable NVMe here. NVMe is considered an extension of Fiber Channel. So you must assign a port a Fiber Channel role, and then from that Fiber Channel role, you can assign the NVMe protocol over the top of it. If we go back, let's cancel out the screen. Probably not. We'll go a little bit more detail. So I'm just going to put this in VLAN 16, assign one of the ports. You'll notice I actually can't pick a single port anymore like I used to pick. Oops. So previously I would be able to actually pick which port I wanted to bind it to. In this case, I'm just assigning a network interface, and then from that network interface, saying that I want it associated with this type of traffic. So if we go to iSCSI, you'll see a similar thing. I can select iSCSI, but I can't select any port to actually bind the interface to. If we look at my current ports, however, you will see they are bound to the physical interfaces associated with them. So you can see, where's my first iSCSI port? Here it is. You can see it's bound on E0C in VLAN 14, indicating which port is currently hosting it. Just like before in the V3 version of the GUI, you can actually see whether a port is on its home port or not. In this case, my cluster management port is not on the home port. And unlike before, where it was very easy to revert the ports back to the owning port, there is no option to quickly move them back. You have to come over here and then say revert. So it will take a little bit of getting used to the new GUI to find where everything is. And because I'm moving the cluster port, I get an error message telling me it can't be determined. That's, again, because I'm connected to that port, so it actually would have to relog back in to see that it migrated back over. And it should now be on the home port. Yes, my cluster management is now on its home port. You will see the fiber channel ports, however, don't have any real statuses. That's because we're looking at network interfaces right now. And in my case, these fiber channel ports are not even connected. The only fiber channel ports I have connected are the 0E ports. Which should, there we are, down here, indicating that they are online and being serviced. You can see the same thing here from the physical view. You can see the two fiber channel ports are connected, 0E, and you can see 0F is not connected in this configuration. And the same thing's true for any of the Ethernet ports that are connected. In my case, I actually have all the Ethernet ports connected because this host is mostly servicing VMware NFS traffic at this point. The event and alerting is fairly similar to what it was before. There's really no significant changes there. So I expect of all the things that will be the most like what you have seen in previous versions. You get the events, you get any indication for how that can be corrected. In my case, I have these connected up to Broadcom switches that we're doing active testing with, so I get a lot of packet errors as we're doing various different tests on the system. If you were to configure mirroring, mirroring is now all under one protection tab, where you set up if you want it to do snap mirrors. Also, any snapshots that you have created on your local tiers are under the protection tab. Previously, your snapshots were under your data aggregate tab. It's now all centrally located in one location, as well as any mirror relationships that you create to the system. This includes snap mirrors, it includes synchronous mirrors, and it includes metro cluster configurations, are all under their relationship options. Previously, those were all under separate tabs. They're all centrally located under one tab now. hosts are only used for SAN configurations. So previously the hosts were all under the storage tab. Now they're all under an individual tab. And this is where you would create your host port definitions for any of the hosts that you want to add. So you can see the 3 ports that I have configured under each of my hosts. In this case, these are the only ports that are actually connected right now. These are my host 3 configurations. The cluster tab is where you will do any of your system updates. So there used to be an option in the previous version of the GUI where you could actually select update. Now in the 9.7 version, to do any cluster firmware update, you go to cluster, overview, you click on these 3 little dots right here, and you select ONTAP update. Also, previously you used to have your disks under the storage view. Now the disks are under the cluster view. This is the only place that you will see the physical layout for your system itself. So again, previously you saw that it said I had 51 drives in each of those aggregates, and I have 72 drives total. That is because it is counting not only the disks, but it is counting partitions on the disks. And this will display all of the status information for any of the drives, as well as the status information for your expansion shelves. And that is all of the new features for the 9.7 GUI.